Well, thanks, everyone. We are now ready to start the first of our two luncheon sessions. And of course, as those of you who've been a part of the program for many years, you know that this is the part of the program in which we really try to double down on the social justice aspect of what we do throughout the day. And this is going to be just a wonderful session because our two speakers just happen to be two good buddies of mine who I get a chance to work with quite a bit on these issues and in so many different organizations. So our two speakers are, this is Suzanne Harrison, who I mentioned earlier. We are both currently overlapping on PPAC. And if I hadn't said things correctly earlier today, she would have checked me. So I think I did it okay, right?
You did great.
Okay, great. Suzanne Harrison is the founder of Percipients, which is an IP strategization firm. And she's also, as is indicated in the program agenda, she is she was the co-chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee at USIPA. And then you're going to talk about this other great big initiative. And before I turn it over and get out of the way, let me also introduce Micheal Binns. How you doing, Mike?
Doing well, doing well. It's great to see you.
Okay, right. Good to see you. Good to see you. He is the Associate General Counsel and Head of Patent Portfolio Strategy, Family of Apps, and IP Trade Secret Protection at Meta. And so now my students know my secret because they know I'm constantly running off to go do this program or that program. I make it seem like it's hard work, but I get to hang out with these guys, right? And so it's a huge perk. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Suzanne.
Okay.
And I guess you've got some things, and then you and Mike will have a little bit of a conversation.
We have a whole shtick.
Okay, that's it. The shtick is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Lateef.
Great.
So Mike and I are here to talk a little bit about inclusivity and mentorship, right? So again, to be fair, I'm on PPAC, but I'm here in my personal capacity. And one of the things that the USPTO did back in, or was asked to do in 2018, was Congress asked them to look at and determine the percentage of women that were on patent applications. And we call that the women inventor rate. And the USPTO came out with a study that said it was 12.5% or 12%-ish. That was the women inventor rate at that time. They've subsequently updated that. I think it's now up to 13%. At this rate, we will all be dead before we have parity. So one of the questions that we had is that how can companies actually begin to manage and think about this number, right? So it was a new metric that nobody had ever thought about before or ever bothered to look at. And so actually one of Mike's bosses, a guy named Alan Lowe, was on the DEI committee with me for the US IP Alliance, which started during COVID, right? So my COVID project was Women Inventor Rate. So it turned out that we wanted to do something actionable in ways that companies could help increase inclusivity and inventorship. So we decided to add on what the SEC was doing with human capital metrics, which is to create an inclusivity metric and have companies begin to manage that metric and see if they could improve whatever their baseline data was. And so Alan and I and some others went out and we talked to 300 companies in order for us to get 30 who would commit to implementing a set of best practices, measuring the results, providing that data over a 3-year period to see if we could, by implementing those best practices, if they could then increase their inclusivity. Meta was the first company to come on board. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about today is both Meta's experiences over these 3 years and a little bit about what now we're up to 50 companies and what the other 49 companies have been doing. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you for a second. Just talk a little bit about Meta's view of DEI and how you guys came into this.
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me, everyone. It's a pleasure to absolutely be here. And I know the first thing you all are wondering is, do I actually have legs like our avatars in the metaverse? The answer is yes, I do. That's really a pulse check. I know you all having lunch, but it's truly an honor to be here. And to your point, Suzanne, I think that that analysis was eye-opening. But before then, the company has really leaned into the idea of supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Every year, Meta, a company formerly Facebook, puts out an annual diversity report. And again, these numbers are public for everyone to see. And we leaned in very, very heavily on making sure that we were increasing the representation of women in technical, non-technical, and leadership roles at the company. We're also very much focused on women globally and making sure that underrepresented minorities and people with disabilities and veterans in the US were highlighted, and that we were really leaning into increasing those numbers steadily. We also made several pledges, like several other companies, during the time frame you're mentioning. They were not our first pledges, but certainly we pledged globally to spend 1.1 billion with diverse-owned businesses, and we were doing all of this. And I think that there's no surprise that so many other companies, Meta included, are very supportive of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and we can name all the acronyms, but we're there and supportive of that. But I think one of the things that we'll talk about today is the kind of the cathartic moment that just because we're doing all these things, it doesn't mean we're doing it right. And that goes back to what you mentioned, Suzanne, which is, were we really focused on innovation and being just as calculated, just as deliberate, and just as inclusive in that space?
That's right. And so, one of the reasons why Alan and I focused on corporations is that when you look at patenting data, far and away, the largest group of patent owners are corporations, right? So if we wanted to make a difference and we wanted to move our national numbers, then we need the largest holders of patents to actually definitively do something. So Mike, as you said, Meta is a big DEI supporter. You've done lots of things, given lots of resources, you've done all this stuff. Did you think you could be doing more?
So funny story, and of course, I'm bearing my soul here in front of an audience that I think understands the situation. The reality is myself, Jeremiah Chen, my manager, and his subsequent manager, Alan Lowe, would always tell you and sing the praises. You love the celebration, that we are doing all the right things in DE&I, and that we were absolutely, if we were to test our numbers, successful. Until we ran the numbers. I think recognizing the issue that you pointed out, in fact, one of the cathartic moments for us was, in fact, back in 2019, and when this information came out from these PPAC meetings, we were understanding that there was a gap between the amount of women inventors and those that were actually participating in the patenting program. So what we then went back to and said, let's test the theory. Let's figure out what the engagement looks like. Let's ask around, find out what they look like. And we were pretty bad. Not far off from where we thought we were. We tried to measure engagement. We tried to measure how many people were aware of the innovation program, and then how many people had participated. And we recognized that the numbers, they were not where we thought. We were low teens at best for knowledge, understanding, and awareness of the patent system. And if you're not aware of the system, well, how can you participate, become an inventor, and then maximize the efforts that our company is looking to do for purposes of innovating?
So one of the things that was interesting is when we went out to talk to companies about joining the pledge, there were companies who said, this isn't important to me, right? That there were just some people who don't believe that this is important. And however, most companies felt it was important, and many companies were very committed to DEI. But then the next thing was that they were desperately afraid of transparency. We know we're going to be horrible at this number. We don't want to come out and at the end of 3 years, if we didn't make a significant gain, we don't want to be able to say that we are still bad, right? So there's this fear of transparency. So, Mike, when Meta signed on to the pledge, how were you guys able to overcome sort of that thinking?
It was tough. I mean, I'll be honest, it was tough. I think the reality is no one wants to be looked at as someone who says something and doesn't represent it on paper or in reality. So we had to say to ourselves, well, where are we? But we are willing to make a change. And as I mentioned before, the numbers were low teens, right? There were not numbers that we were proud of. But I think what we were proud of is the fact that we were willing to make a change. And you can't make a change without knowledge of where you are and then working through that journey. So we had to just kind of overcome that fear, recognizing that this is what's best for promoting these goals, not just at Meta, not just with the organizations that have made the pledge, but it's society as a whole.
That's right. So why don't you talk a little bit about, so how has your journey been as you've been participating through the pledge and sort of a little bit of your evolution?
Yeah, so I think for us, and I think everybody can appreciate this, it's going to be the 5 stages of grief, right? I mean, I think we all can think about, well, what are we dealing with in terms of who we are, what we represent, and what we want to accomplish. And the first of which is if I'm being quite frank, it's going to be anger. Well, that's the second step. It's really denial. We talked a little bit about how we were in denial about what our statistic numbers were, how we were managing those numbers, and we thought that we were much better than people anticipated because we were doing so many things as a company to promote diversity, to make sure that we had a workforce that was representative of our broader society. I'm not saying that those numbers are there, but year over year, if you look at our diversity numbers, we're working and we're actually making strides, which is great. But that denial was proven completely wrong. And then we went to the anger phase. But recognizing that, look, you can't just be angry about it. You must do something about it. I think the pledge really helped us to kind of craft a lens around how we can not only shape what we already have, but then expand it, right? So then that's what we decided to do. We brought in a behavioral scientist to help us understand what we needed to do. And we engaged with our clients. Then we revamped our process. And then we changed the mindset of our team to align to make sure that we were going to tackle this initiative head on, that we were going to make sure that we would increase engagement with women and underrepresented groups. And so we did that. We rolled out a 5-step process that included awareness. So you can't engage with an innovation system you're not aware of. So we wanted to make that front and center of our programming. Then we actually acted on that engagement. So made sure that we went out purposefully to work with the people within our community that we wanted to serve. And then we increased submission of innovations. That's it at the point, that was going to drive a lot of the work that we were doing. And then as we'll talk about, you have to have an evaluation process. You have to realize, are we working? Are these things the right things? And if they're not, we have to pivot. And I'll tell you, quite frankly, Suzanne and everyone in attendance, we didn't always get it right. There were missteps. There were false starts. I can remember one really touching moment where our colleague had spent so much time putting together an event that we thought would just completely change the landscape of innovation at the company. It was targeted at women, and we had brought out all these different swag and tchotchkes, and we had outside counsel ready to come, and no one showed up. Just no one showed up. So it's not going to always work, but you can't say to yourself, well, just because this doesn't work, that you should give up. And we pivoted in a lot of ways that have really helped us over time. And look, it's not always going to move the needle as drastically as you think it will, but we're proud to say that we're still committed to doing it.
So let's talk a little bit about results for a moment. So as part of the pledge, companies pledge to give data over a 3-year period. And we had a firm, Richardson Oliver Insights, that collected the data, anonymized it, and gave it back to USIPA. So while I know who participated in the survey, I don't know whose data is who. So we had, of our 50 companies, we had 30 companies that just did our first survey. Some companies didn't have a full year of data to do it yet. And we asked the companies, they were not required to give us their women inventor rates, but of the 30, 17 volunteered that information. And of the 17, 6 gave us year 1 and year 2 data. So of the 6 that gave year 2 data, the average increase in women inventor rate was 23%. That's pretty big. That's a pretty significant change. And so, Mike, when you think about it meta, how things have been over the last 3 years, what are some of the key things you think have changed that seem to be working quite well?
I think for us, we had to realize that we had to be very thoughtful and had to be inclusive at our core. Previously, we were looking for innovations within the company. There's no disagreement that that's still a significant part of our job. I mean, we are patent attorneys. Our job is to mitigate risk for the company and make sure that we capture the innovations that are going to help us to ship the products and services that our clients and customers need. But similarly, that doesn't mean you can't approach your innovation gathering with inclusivity in mind. And the reality is we can talk a little bit about what those numbers are. I think Director Vidal made these very clear. But if we have more engagement, we have a more inclusive innovation system, we're going to create strategies that are going to be better for the company. I mean, we've realized that statistically speaking, women are galvanizing when it comes to innovations at Meta. They not only innovate on their own when we innovate and reach out inclusively, but they also grab other people from diverse groups who are other women. They grab members of the majority and they build broader, better teams and better innovations. So that was something that we really had to say, we're going to do this. And that was one of the learnings I think that we took away. Others, of course, is just making sure that we were transparent. But we wanted to make sure that we continue to participate in sharing the data with other members, with the organization, so that we have measurements and metrics. And then we also had to make sure that we provided an opportunity for our inventive community to engage with us and feel a part of the community, even if we don't pursue a particular idea, that they knew to come to us and they knew that we were a part of it, because that inclusivity, it really matters.
So I would say for the companies that filled out the survey, there were a couple of points that Mike alluded to that let me just elucidate. The first is that words matter, right? So in particular, in dealing with underrepresented groups, inventor is a really loaded term. That really seems Einstein-like, right? It seems like I have to have some incredibly brilliant billion-dollar idea to be an inventor, and that's not true, right? Do you solve a problem? If so, tell me about it, right? So we need to unpack that word a little bit and make it more accessible. That's the first thing. Second thing is that, not all ideas are necessarily good ideas or ideas that the company it's related to the corporate strategy and objectives, right? So again, you are going to get rejection. And many times when you're through the inventorship process, how you get that rejection matters. And just saying that, no, it's not good enough. But how about let's query, here's what you could do to make it better. If you still believe this is a solid idea, here's the changes you need to make, right? So let me give you some constructive feedback instead of just a hard no. I know, Mike, at Meta, you guys actually spent some time looking at some of the language about your rejections. If you can just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, quite a bit. So to take a step back as to what our holistic approach was, as I mentioned, we brought in a behavioral specialist to kind of help us analyze that. I mean, look, no offense to anybody in the room, I'm going to take myself as a prime example. Patent attorneys aren't exactly trained in bedside manner. We're not there to make people feel warm and fuzzy about a 102 rejection, right? If you tell someone, oh, no, that's obvious. My wife has told me enough times when speaking to clients that I probably could have delivered that a little bit better. But so part and parcel to that is that our system wasn't as warm and fuzzy either. When we did reject an inventive idea, or at least a submission within our system, it wasn't delivering a warm and fuzzy to our inventor community. So if we were happen to have a woman or underrepresented person submit an idea and we rejected it, better believe that they're not coming back, not based on the email we were originally writing. So we utilize design thinking with this behavioral specialist to kind of refine our language, to make it a lot more inclusive, to make it warm, so that we can empathize with our community. And to your point, Suzanne, we actually have a lot more people that now feel welcome. It's not that we're accepting more inventive ideas. It's that we've created a space for people to kind of ask the question, well, what could I have done differently? Why are we not, how do I make sure I get the next submission through? And what I think is important here is that we didn't do it solely as a patent team. We started to talk with the rest of the company, business leadership, senior leadership, and get buy-in because they understood the data. Cognitive teams make for better innovations, make for better diversity, and in turn, makes for a better bottom line. So if you just take that as fact, because it really is, then they understood that if we could show that our innovators would want to come into the program, it made a lot of difference. And we have videos from our senior leadership and our CTO and others who said, look, just because the invention is rejected once, doesn't mean it's not, you are not an inventor, you're not an innovator. Continue to engage, continue to think outside the box, continue to talk with the patent team. And we found that we have a lot more engagement now with one-on-one teams who are looking to us for guidance on exactly what we want. And over the last year, I can say concretely, we're getting more submissions from diverse groups that are actually patentable and strive to further our business. And it's been because of the education and the invitation to the party, if you will.
Right. And I think the other thing that companies recognize was that, as was said in the panel before us, mentoring is incredibly important. Mentoring about the inventorship process, right? I mean, if you've never engaged in this process, it can be a little daunting, right? People get to throw rocks at your ideas and tell you if it's good or not good. And that doesn't always feel good, right? And so you want to be prepared. You want to know what your process is. You want to know how to engage and do all of that. And again, this mentoring of the inventorship process turned out to be critical for underrepresented inventors to prepare them for the process and to make them understand and feel good about the process regardless of the outcome. I think a third thing that came out, which was incredibly surprising to many of us, was the way that many people think about being a prosecuting attorney is that you sit back and people come to you with their ideas, and your job is just to curate the process and you just run the stuff through. But is that really your job? Is it your job to figure out the best set of ideas that are going to put forward the highest probability of success for the technical future of the company? And to do that, you can't just sit passively in your office. You have to go out and talk to people. You have to go out and explain why this is important to the company. What is the value they're going to get from that? How are you going to participate? How do your ideas and your product solutions or problem solutions matter? And so I think, Mike, at Meta, how did that impact your whole team of attorneys?
Well, I couldn't agree more with you. It's not simply just looking for ideas. I think we tried to implement, and again, this was looking ourselves in the mirror and recognizing we weren't doing it right, admittedly, is we had to increase our awareness and increase our engagement. And one, you must make not only underrepresented groups aware of your innovation system, but I think holistically taking that approach to being where people are. Unfortunately, a byproduct of not being aware is that women and underrepresented groups are often left out of the equation, and therein lies the problem, which means you're not maximizing your innovative potential. If everybody at the company is eligible to submit an idea and to innovate, then why aren't we seeing more of that uptick? Well, it's that awareness piece. And then the second piece, of course, is the engagement. So part of the engagement is to share what's important to us, what's important to the company. How are we doing that in a way that it's meaningful? And then if we can do that, then we can actually create opportunities. One of the members of our team, Kevin Ahlstrom, really tried to think outside the box and leverage that in a 653 method, which is engaging with specific teams and stakeholders to meet on ideas that are very specific to the company, almost like an ideation hackathon. Many of you may be familiar with the idea of a hackathon. It's one of our ethoses at Meta. It's the idea of simply putting forth the problem, figuring out what that solution could be, and letting everybody have at it. And everyone at the company, they get galvanized around a singular goal, a singular innovation, and they do it. And this is often something that has been a big part of us, our process at Meta, but we weren't doing that deliberately. Again, engaging with inclusivity in mind. And we started doing that. So our diversity brainstorms actually gathered a number of diverse individuals in a room with outside counsel and in-house counsel to talk through the things that we cared the most about. And then we realized that not only were we building closer, more thoughtful teams, but we're building bigger and more innovative ideas that were inclusive of members of our team. And again, it's really just thinking about those two areas, awareness and engagement. I think if you focus on those two, you'll see an increase in inventorship from women and underrepresented groups. And then I think the other caveat too is you're going to see a lot of repeaters coming through the system who are not only supportive, but advocates for your cause that will ultimately benefit the bottom line.
And I think just to maybe hone you just a little bit, at the beginning of this process, a lot of the prosecuting attorneys thought that this was something extra they did on top of their job. And Mike, can you just talk a little bit about how that, is that still the mindset at Meta, or has that changed?
So just to kind of acknowledge that there was some churn. I mean, no surprise, right? When you're breaking out of your habits, it's going to be uncomfortable. We naturally are resistant to change. And I think our team, while meaning well, was resistant to change as well. We all like to think we're doing a fantastic job. So when you're saying, you're kind of missing these spots, it takes a little bit of self-reflection to recognize that. So there was a little churn there. We had to think, okay, we're not just responsible for looking at all invention disclosures that may come in. We're responsible for meaningfully engaging with inclusivity in mind. And then I think initially people were reticent, they were hesitant, but then we gave everybody the opportunity and space to think about efficiency. We gave people the opportunity to think about outside the box, how we can do this in a way that meant the most. And as I mentioned, Kevin Ahlstrom's article on the 653 design thinking method really helped us really engage with certain teams. And then we also had other people that created new and innovative ways to engage and measure our metrics. So Christine Fu and Mike Miller, for example, came up with an innovator data analysis, a dashboard that mapped how we were actually engaging, talking through the members of our respective teams, how many of them were women, were we able to kind of see the groups in which they identified. And we started to then get new ideas of ways to engage that actually replaced the old way of thinking. And that's really what it was. I think people felt more included. People felt that we were doing a better job. And people actually felt that there was some warmth and comfort coming out of the innovation system. It wasn't that we were just miners looking for gold or looking for a diamond. We were actually looking for rare diamonds and rare elements and having a better time at doing it, whistling while you work, if you will.
So, while all this sounds lovely and fantastic, as we know, companies really like to care about dollars and cents. And has this been manifesting itself in that way? And so what we ask companies to do at the beginning of each of this engagement is to determine how this is going to bring value to the company. And so we don't care per se what the value is, as long as it's meaningful for them. So increasing employee retention is a huge one. Inventor retention. Sometimes you get, as Mike was saying, you get better, more diverse product teams, which actually tends to do better in the market overall, those products. You tend to have teams that more closely align with your customer base, and therefore you tend to have things that read on those customers a little bit better. We can go on and on and on, but this has manifested as valuable for companies. And so I think that's also something that's important to understand. So
Suzanne, I have one example there, and I don't want this to be a shameless plug, right? But I mean, the reality is when we built our MetaQuest product, we built it in a way that was not as inclusive as we thought, but it was an inventor, a diverse inventor, a female inventor who mentioned the idea that the number one disability in America is vision. Many people wear glasses. And so if we want full inclusion for purposes of using a virtual reality or mixed reality headset, we had to build them so that they can fit glasses on the inside without having to get contacts or lenses or inserts. That became something that was an aha moment for an engineering team. And that was something that was brought to the fore by a woman that we engaged in the innovative process. And so now all of our VR headsets come that way with space to fit glasses. Now, if the business can't understand that diverse thinking has allowed us to build better, more inclusive products, I think that the proof is in the pudding.
Agreed. And, you know, a lot of, again, going back to when we were first starting this process, a lot of companies, of course, I've just completely lost my train of thought. Don't you hate when that happens?
That was my fault. I interrupted you.
That's
I
right.
apologize.
No. A lot of companies were afraid that this was going to be a zero-sum game. So if we increased representation of women, does that mean we were going to do it to the exclusion of men? And there was a lot of fear in the inventor base about doing that. And what we can say is unequivocally, guess what? All inventorship went up. So for every company where the women increased, so did the male participation. And so that goes back to, again, this process of going out and evangelizing should rise all boats, right? So I think that's also something that's incredibly important, particularly in our legal environment today, where there's a focus on ensuring that there is, you know, you're not targeting one specific group or one specific thing. And so, you know, Mike, let's talk a little bit about the elephant in the room. There have been some severe layoffs going on within the tech community writ large. And so how have you seen that impact DEI at Meta, or has it at all?
In my honest opinion, I feel as though we have only leaned in further, as diversity is one of our pledges. It's something that we're continuing to focus on and continuing to incentivize at the company. So in addition to my role on the patent team, of course, I am involved in many DEI programs across the company. I'm the co-chair of Black at Legal, our Black affinity group. And I'll tell you, I've personally been involved in several different meetings and summits where we're responsible for helping to define and drive diverse initiatives at the company. And I'm working not just with the legal profession, but with the broader company at large. In the innovative space, we've seen, to your point earlier, Suzanne, that women are galvanizing. Diverse innovators are galvanizing. It's a rising tide for all ships. We have only detected roughly 7.6% of female inventors as solo inventors. So that means that more than 92% of innovations that have women as a part of the process have included other groups. They've included other people, other initiatives. And that's still a big part of what makes us important. I mean, no matter what, we have to build for a diverse community. We have to build for a diverse population. And therefore, we have to make diversity a big part of what we do. Let's be honest, we file less applications. So if we're going to file less applications, we have to file stronger applications. And those stronger applications have to be more thoughtful, more specific, and very much focused on our company priorities. And I'll tell you now that they are. And if we were alienating some of the members of our inventor community, that we're going to see a decline in quality. And thankfully, we're not. So the reality is we've leaned in to DEI at Meta. And I know that's to be true at a few other companies as well. And in fact, have continued to innovate in not only the work we do with our innovative community, but in programs that we've built to support that and partnered with other organizations like yours to support that in the community itself.
So I think that one of the things, also one of the interesting things that has come out of this initiative is that companies are using patent data to visualize, you know, where bias may exist in the inventorship decision process. And so again, when you see at the IDF stage, 50-50 male, female, in, you know, idea submissions, and yet you only see 10% women make it through an application, you think, why? What happened in that decision process? Let's go back and evaluate that. And let's look at how is that decision being made? Is there unintentional bias somehow embedded here? Is there education that needs to happen? And so again, I think companies are very adept at looking at data to make better decisions. They're not as adept at understanding feelings companies don't do well with that. So I think, again, trying to use data to help understand and ferret out where there's unintentional bias in decision-making has been very helpful for many attorneys. So we've been talking about inclusivity for most of this, but let's turn a little bit and talk about diversity. Mike, can you talk a little bit about your PPP program, please?
Yeah, so the PPP program, or Patent Pipeline Program, was partnership with an organization called the National Council of Patent Practicum, the ncpp.org. It was founded by one of our now team members. And when that person joined, we said, can we do more to further diversity within the patent profession itself? And what was important there is we had to focus on what we were missing. I'll tell you now, we're looking at the data as a part of another organization I'm involved in, ADAPT, and our community of patent attorneys and practitioners is aging out. Soon, we're not going to have the practitioners to manage the innovations that are coming through. So we have to fix that. And I think the reality is, in order to fix that, we have to fix the pipeline. And that is what the PPP program, or Patent Pipeline Program, is designed to do. So it's a pretty simple equation. It's a triangle. So what we do is we find a number of diverse women and underrepresented groups who have graduated undergrad or graduate school, who have a STEM degree, who are interested in a career in intellectual property. Second is we find a willing company like Meta. And again, this is not a Meta-specific program. We were just one of the original companies to participate. You find a corporation that's willing to mentor and allow for volunteer work of the PPP scholars internally. And then the last important member of the triangle is the law firms. So these law firms are willing to hire these individuals. And what's nice about it is the law firms get to curate a list of applicants that have the background and expertise that they're looking for. The Patent Pipeline Program, the NCPP, teaches these students for free for a period of 4 months how to prepare and prosecute applications. And I promise you, go and check your new associates who are in that practice. They know nothing the day they walk in. But everyone who graduates the PPP program, they're extremely versed. They've drafted claims, they've drafted applications, they've conducted examiner interviews, and all of this is a part of the rigorous curriculum that they go through. This information is shared with the partner law firms. Those law firms then get to select, interview, and hire from that pool of candidates. They have a trial period where they get to work with the law firms, internship at the corporation or corporations in some cases, and then they get the opportunity to hire them. So we're deliberately finding individuals who get trained in the space, who get to find careers at law firms, making good money in a profession that they love, that they never knew existed. And so far, we've graduated more than 24 over the course of 3 cohorts.
I think that's great. And I think one of the things that we want to highlight here is scale, right? It's really fantastic that you've graduated 24. We need to be talking about tens of thousands, right?
Yes.
Mike wasn't kidding when he said ADAPT did a study that showed that 45% of IP practitioners have 20+ years experience. 45% have 5 to 20, 10% have less than 5 years. Okay, I don't care what you think about AI. It's not going to take up that many people. It's not going to replace that many people, right? So that means the entire process by which we deal with lawyers and coming in and training is going to turn on its head, and we don't have a mechanism to deal with that. So we need diversity. We also just need everybody, right? Law school graduates tanked since 2008, right? IP tanked since 2008. Why would you go here into this area when all you hear is doom and gloom about how things are bad? So again, I think everybody here in this room has power and privilege. You know, you can make decisions that fundamentally alter someone's life. You just have to do it. You don't even have to ask permission, right? As chief IP counsel or outside counsel, you can make some of these decisions. And Mike, can you talk specifically about how you're including your outside counsel in a lot of the work that you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, the Patent Pipeline Program doesn't work without all 3 components of the triangle. All corners are important, and our law firms are responsible for hiring these individuals. So we make a commitment and a pledge to give work to these law firms that will do that allows them to feed these new technical specialists and patent agents. That's a direct corollary to the work that we're doing to make sure that they're bringing in diverse members and diverse teams. We also highlight our diverse firms at Meta and make sure that they're rewarded in a way that's meaningful to them. Look, I was a partner at a law firm. I understand what the metrics are. It's dollars in and it's profitability, and we're very in tune to that at Meta, and we reward that for the teams that build diverse. That's important to us. And the other is we also focus on getting our law firms involved in organizations like ADAPT and supportive of building and hiring diverse teams. Because if we don't have the practitioner population to service our innovator population and one that looks like them, we're doing our ultimate company goals a disservice.
Can you also just, before we end, talk a little bit about ADAPT?
Yeah, so the patent pipeline program actually spurned on several things. One is at least a start to change, and I couldn't agree with you more. We need to scale that 24. We need to go to well beyond. But it started conversations with Meta, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, the Walt Disney Company, and Cruise to say, what are other organizations and affiliates that we're working with to help build and boost diversity? And then we learned that there were so many other different organizations doing great things. Microsoft with its Make What's Next program that's focused on really boosting the number of elementary age women who are aware of female inventors and getting them involved in the space, as well as street law that Google champions and other initiatives. So we came together 2 years ago to found ADAPT, Advancing Diversity Across Patent Teams. The website is adapt.legal. There's really 3 core initiatives at ADAPT, the first of which is to provide programs like the Patent Pipeline Program, make them accessible to anyone, whether you're a member or not, to go ahead and go online at adapt.legal and use and review the dynamics of the Patent Pipeline Program or any other initiative. The second is data, as you mentioned, Suzanne. So we've been working a lot with Suzanne to understand the legal landscape. She on the innovator side and ADAPT on the practitioner side. And this is where the stark contrast in the number of practitioners aging out is coming from. And the last is mentorship. Our mentorship program is focused on giving women and underrepresented groups an opportunity to really shine by assigning them 6, not 1, not 2, but 6 mentors who is effectively a network within the community that can help them navigate a career in intellectual property. And I'm proud to say that those 7 companies is now fully represented by more than 70 companies globally. So we have a division in Europe. We're looking at Asia, and are proud to say that it's expanding even into South America based on a call I had just last week. It's been a wild ride, but we still need more. There's no membership dues to join ADAPT, whether you're a corporation or a law firm. It's simply a commitment that you're willing to do something more than you're doing today. And if you're already doing something fantastic, great. Share that with our platform and it'll make us a better organization as a whole.
Great. And also, I just want to say for the Diversity Pledge, it's increasingdii.org. It is also free. If you come in, we have working groups where companies are sharing what they've learned with other companies to help make sure that everyone gets up and running as quickly as possible. Mike and I want to thank you for spending your time with us today. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you.